Keep your heart open, keep your heart open, keep your heart open to love. My heart is open, my heart is open, my heart is open to love. Keep your heart open, keep your heart open, keep your heart open to love. My heart is open, my heart is open, my heart is open to love.
Rosie, so good to be here with you today.
Thanks.
So, I understand that you are A, an author, B, a spiritual teacher, C, a cosmic catalyst. So I want to know more about your books, Awaken and Soul Befriending. But could you start by telling us about being a cosmic catalyst?
Well, I named myself that.
Yeah?
Because I like the sound of it.
Okay.
It has a nice ring. It has a nice song. And my job is to wake people up to their spaciousness, to their wholeness, to who they are. And so I used to be a therapist, and that was to awaken human potential.
Yes.
And now I'm a cosmic catalyst to awaken divine potential as well as human potential.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Like that?
I do. So your recent book that was published, because Soul Befriending is soon to come out,
Correct.
Awaken. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well,
Awaken your all-knowing heart is your tagline.
exactly, yeah. Your all-knowing heart is like the subtitle, because it occurred to me that we've all learned how to be rational, and awaken is about how to be relational, and the presence of love. So it's very much like love is who we are, not what we do.
Love is who we are, not what we do.
Exactly. So the whole concept, the whole theme of that book is awaken to who you are, which is love. And it starts with self-love and goes on to love of others, and then goes into cosmic love, because I'm a Pisces and the cosmos is just really dear to my heart.
I got it. Well, you know what I enjoyed about that book is in 200 pages, you really placed a lot of exercises that really engage the reader and start them pretty close at the beginning and progressively bring them through processes, self-inquiry, which I'm a deep believer in self-inquiry as spiritual practice and spiritual growth. So I loved your exercises and the way that you engaged the reader that way. Do you want to say anything about that at all?
I'm so glad you do, because I really spent a lot of time designing that book. So Awaken is, for me, it's like a year's workshop between covers. And I've been a journal keeper for 40 years, a hopeless journal keeper. Every day I journal.
Yes.
And tracking myself to make sure I'm in integrity.
Yes.
With myself, and my soul has just been, it's been a rich life practice. So I wanted to embed some of those skills and prompts into the book.
Yeah. You know, that's one of the things I've sincerely appreciated about you is your rich journal life, because to tell you the truth, I wish I had had as rich a journal life as you have had. I have not documented many segments of my life in the way that I wish I had. And you said something to me over coffee one day. You said, journal keeping is a spiritual practice. You want to say anything about that?
Well, for me it is.
Yeah.
Because I can keep track of my soul story. I can keep track of my human story and my soul story, and the intersections and the bridges. And then having friends who keep journals.
Yes.
My best friend Allison Strickland and I wrote a book together called Harvesting Your Journals.
Yes, yes.
So it's been, and I share my journals with friends. I mean, we share them as a celebration ritual
Yeah.
So it's a way of deep intimacy,
Yeah.
actually.
Intimacy with self.
Intimacy with self,
And
with chosen others that
Yeah.
I want to share, who I am and who I'm becoming.
Yes. Yeah. So you went on, and you now have soul befriending. What
Yeah.
first? Let's contemplate that title, soul befriending. Fascinating. Tell us about
Thank
that.
you, I love it.
And what's the high beam living?
High beam living and loving
High beam living and loving.
is the title that
Yes.
publicists just go nuts over.
Ah.
My preference is soul befriending, but I'll go with both. I'll go with and.
Okay. All right.
Basically, soul befriending is about how to begin bridging personal story, and personal story often is about coping. So moving from coping to transforming. So soul story is about transforming. So I start the book with talking about I grew up in Old Orchard, and there was a twin movie, Portland Drive-In, had twin screens.
Uh-huh.
And if you sat in aisle 11 in your car,
Aisle 11.
you could, yes, aisle, you couldn't do it in other aisles. You could see the movie in front of you and hear it.
Right.
But you also, from the rear view mirror, could see the movie playing on the other screen. No voice.
Right.
Okay? So I use that metaphor in terms of what story are we starring in right now?
Right.
Personal story or soul story? Because they run simultaneously. For me, anyway. It just depends on what you're seeing and what you're not seeing, and how deeply you're willing to see. So the whole deal is, for me, and T.S. Eliot said it so much better than I could, and he said, we are a soul, we have a body.
Exactly.
And when I heard that, it was like, wow,
Yeah.
that's wisdom.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
how can someone summarize my whole life in 7 words?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. Yeah.
and the book has lots of stories, lots of personal stories. It has lots of exercises and prompts and strategies. It's a workbook.
It's a workbook similar to Awaken.
Absolutely.
What would you say is the relationship between the two? Is soul befriending level 2 Awaken, or do they each stand on their own? How
It's
is
a progression.
It's a progression.
Because I grew up.
Yes.
I grew up in the 3 years between the books, and I don't write a book unless I've lived into it.
Got it.
So this is an extension of what I believe and who I'm becoming, and what I'm beckoning others to. I'm beckoning people to be spacious. I'm beckoning people to
Spacious.
be in their magnificence. That's what high being living and loving is. It's about being all that we can be, pulling out all the stops.
Yes, yes. Well, something else I appreciate and love about you is that you have a very grounded psychological approach and training and education, and yet you are gifted, you are a psychic, you do soul readings.
I do.
And part of your assisting people and awakening to themselves is you said to me, energy is information, and you said to me, energy follows need.
Correct.
Tell me about that.
Well, in terms of a soul reading, in terms of that context, everybody has a soul's purpose. And a soul reading looks at soul's purpose. That's the information. And whatever the person needs to know to assist them to align with their soul's purpose gets revealed in a soul reading. It's like jumping off a cliff. That's why I love to do it, you see. It's like jumping off a cliff because I have absolutely no information.
Yeah.
When I sit down with a person and I connect heart to heart,
Yes.
actually high heart to high heart,
Yes.
and their guides, talk to my guides, and my mouth opens, and we're all surprised. Yeah, it's part of being a cosmic catalyst is being a vessel.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, movement from personal story often is victim to victor, and some people stop at victor.
Mm-hmm.
Cosmic catalyst moves from victor to vessel, so that information grows to guidance, grows to wisdom, and everybody is capable of that wisdom voice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How did you come into knowing this gift within yourself, and did it need to be cultivated and developed, and did you do that consciously, or was it just a gift that you had and were able to express it? How was it for you?
I was born intuitive.
You were born into it?
I was born intuitive.
Yes.
But then I trained.
Yeah.
I trained at Duke University in the parapsychology department.
In your soul readings, tell us a bit more about what it's like for the person who wants to have a soul reading for you. Is it by Skype or remotely or over the telephone? And how does it work when someone does a personal reading with you?
Well, it's always. Probably half the people that I do a soul reading with call on the telephone.
Mm-hmm.
Soul is non-local,
Mm-hmm.
so connecting here in High Heart gives me all the information I need. And I often have to figure out time zones because people call from different countries. So a lot of people call. I don't do Skype because I don't want to be distracted by a person's face or demeanor.
Right.
So it's phone calls. My preference is to see a person sitting down so I can talk and touch them.
Yes.
But it doesn't make any difference. The information is the same.
Got it. And is a soul reading usually a one-time reading, or every few years or a year or periodically? How does that work?
Yeah, soul reading lasts for about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And sometimes for people it's a one-time experience.
Right.
Other people decide they want to do some soul coaching to ground or claim parts of their soul purpose that it might just be a little out of reach. So I offer a soul coaching package as well. Some people will do what they call a tune-up every couple of years, and in that context, a soul reading looks at the cycle the person is in, what's being supported on a soul level for this time period.
Right. Well, let me just touch something personal. So I know that you have very deep grounding in working with grief.
Yes.
And you have very deep personal experience with that.
Correct.
I don't know if you want to share about that here, but grief, for example, as an example.
I do work with a lot of, particularly moms,
Yes.
who've had the death of one of their children, and a child can be, months old or 45 years old, still a child. And so I work with them.
Yes.
And that's very precious, sacred work for me.
Yes.
Because my son Mike, as you know,
Yes.
was electrocuted, and actually his death was really an awakening for me, in terms of my intuition, in terms of what I believe and what I had to let go of.
And what you're willing to claim and claim strongly.
Exactly. The two are intertwined for me.
Yeah.
Who I am now is absolutely connected
Yeah.
to Mike's death 40 years ago.
40 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're deep into women's work.
Yes.
And you run these amazing retreats, I know, from speaking with some of your participants who love you. And maybe you want to say a little bit about that too. You seem to have these going in cycles.
Well, I do. I do a 7-month program called Embodying Soul, which is not only for women.
Right.
Men are invited.
Men are invited.
Men are invited. And basically, it's about really claiming the divine feminine for women and men, and befriending intuition.
Befriending intuition.
Befriending intuition, befriending intention, befriending meditation, befriending our own soul. So basically, it's about spaciousness.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about claiming magnificence.
Spaciousness, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know from our conversations that legacy is important to you. And before we go talk about legacy, is there anything else you want to talk about, either your books or your soul readings or your workshops?
I just want to go back to love is who we are, not what we do.
Mm.
So for me, at the end of every day, I look at the day that has lived through me and that I've lived through, and I question myself in terms of how have I contributed to love this day? And each night before I go to bed, I make a goal to contribute more the next day. And it's a practice. And I think raising my two grandchildren, Malia and Noah, I learned that for every judgment or every critical thing I said, I needed to do 5 gratitudes. So for every judgment I had, I tried my best to come up with 5 gratitudes, and I do that to myself now too, because I can be judgmental.
No.
Yes.
No.
Again. You should watch me when I'm in the rewriting process if you want to see self-judgment in action. But it's a practice, and it shifted something inside of me to be the bestower of gratitude, self-gratitude, and self-validation, rather than waiting or expecting or wanting it from outside.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge in terms of shifting from personal story to soul story.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I love that about you, because I've been so aware that you have an authentically deep and unique practice that constantly evolves for you. That's what I embrace in myself, and I very much see that in you, and that you very much embody your practice. It's not just all a cognitive process, but an embodied process.
Yeah,
It's
being
very beautiful.
authentic is part of my legacy I hope to leave.
Yes.
Just being true to oneself,
Right.
and following your song, whatever your soul's song is, just to follow it no matter what. No matter what.
Beautifully said.
Thank
Beautifully
you.
said.
Keep your heart open, keep your heart open, keep your heart open to love. My heart is open, my heart is open, my heart is open to love.